Oops. So yeah, good afternoon everyone. So today we are having a session on homework 4 and 5. But before starting to that, I need to give some kind of an update on couple of things. Maybe let me share my screen. Yes. So one is regarding the project. So you can see, for example, project and employee, there are two entities and the relationship is work. So for example, if you think you have to create a relationship table, I mean, apart from project and employee, you can still create tables for relationship, or you can fill it with either of the table, either project or an employee. So I had couple of doubts regarding that. So if you are trying to create additional table in that way, it will be helpful. Then you can just create it. And second one is regarding homework 2. I guess most of them are facing issues with inserting the data. PG admin loads. So ideally, in ideal situation, if you have, for example, these are the different constraints and the condition which needs to be added to that particular table. So ideally, in Postgres, there is something called on constrained do nothing. This should allow you to insert all the data even if it is violating the constraint. But Postgres has this tool has some kind of weird thing which, I mean, which is not allowing to insert if there is any constraint for the table. So there are a couple of workarounds for this. One thing is you can create the table and insert all the data, I mean, without adding any partition or something. Then you can delete the data which will violate the constraint, and you can add the partitions. That is one thing, but there is a better workaround for this. So if you install pgadmin, along with that there is called psql, which is the SQL shell for Postgres. If you haven't changed anything during the installation, or I mean, if you haven't unchecked some of the things, I guess this would have been in your PC. So most of the information will automatically pop up. So you can just fill out the information. So it will ask for server and database. Currently, I am using, on the left side, you can see testing.2. So you can give that as a database. Port is, I didn't change anything, so I'm giving that. And username is also same. Password is, what is your password? So once these informations are correct, it will have a kind of similar to Python script. It will have kind of a command prompt for you to type all your SQL commands. So if you are not able to get this kind of a prompt, then your information is wrong in some other way. So once you get this prompt, you can just copy the entire data from the SQL. So Control C, then you can just right click, it will paste. But before that, I will show, I have already created that partition table. So you can see orders table has some partitions, and inside the partition there are those four partitions which was required to create: first, second, third, and fourth. And in the first, we need to create, say, we need to create couple of partitions actually. One is for USA and UK, and another is for Germany and Finland. But along with that, try to create a partition for all the rest of the countries. So I created two partition which is required, and try to create one more partition for the first partition, that is rest of country, which will have values of all the countries apart from the four. Okay, there are some 10 countries, I guess. So try to find out what are the countries and create a partition for those countries so that it will not violate the subpartition constraint. So once you have created it, you can just right click it. I mean, you don't need to control V, you can just right click on it. So it will just paste it. So currently it has inserted all the data. You can just check in your table. So you can see all the data which doesn't violate the constraint which we created has been inserted. So you can check this table and division. So there are 171 rows, and inside that we have America and UK partition. Does not exist. Something happened. Okay. So it got deleted or something. I don't know. So I mean, this is how you have to insert the data inside the SQL cell so that the data will be inserted. Ideally, it should not work like this, but I don't know what happened to Postgres. This is having that issue. So I guess this will sort out most of your issues of inserting the data. You can just insert like this. It will be in the Postgres. So this is regarding that. And one more doubt was regarding saving the SQL file. So once you have added your SQL code, and you can just click on the save button and you have to type your file name here. So I guess some of them are not doing it, so it will not pop up the create button. So try to give some kind of test or something, so it will have a create button. You can just create the file. So these are couple of doubts which was common from students. So do you have any questions? Okay, so we have seen till homework 3, so we will see 4 and 5 today. Before going to 4, I want to tell 5 because 4 and 5 are almost same. So if you can see, 4 is related to roles and functions in SQL. Okay, so what are the roles? So in Postgres, there are, for example, in the Postgres itself, by default, you can see on the left side, there are like 12 roles, which is created by default by Postgres. Apart from that, you can also create some roles and assign some permission to those roles. What exactly it will do? For example, we are having 3 teams in a project. Okay, one is development, one is testing, and one is the production team, for example. So development team has to have an access for all the tables, but testing team doesn't want have to have a access for all the tables. So in order to restrict them from accessing the rest of the table, you can assign the permission for that particular login roles or whatever. Okay, for example, I am creating a role for one person, and if the person is a tester, I will restrict like, okay, this person can access this much column and this much table alone. He will not be able to access the rest of the uh, tables or database or whatever. So that is one of the use case you can think of when you think of creating a login or users. So I mean, as we already know, there are like read, write, and insert, select. There are a lot of permission which are there, but as far as the assignment concerned, so we need to create user, manager, and owner, 3 roles, and the owner should have all the permissions. So it is like he should have all read, delete, insert, update, or whatever permission it is. So he has to have that, and the user should have only the read access, So in this case, if you consider SQL, it is only select access. You should not be able to insert any data. You should not be able to update or delete any data. It's like he has to have only the select permission. And insert, as the name suggests, he should have an insert permission. So for creating roles, there are certain syntax. You can create roles directly from Postgres. Okay. You can create, like, for example, owner. Okay. So, and there is a question related to trainee. There is a role called trainee, and the role should end by 35/1/2022. So you can just assign the date here for the expiration date. So this is just, it will create a role. Okay. Once it is created the role, you can grant or revoke access of that particular role. There is a format called grant that particular role name, and what are the permission he has to have. So it's simple, straightforward. So you have to create a role, and then you have to grant or revoke the role based on the permission. So this is the first part of the assignment for the roles and creating roles and managing it. I guess yes. So it's basically the exact syntax is grant. I mean, this is literally you can replace with your whatever role. So we need to tell what are the permissions it is needed. So if it is all permission, we need to select, we need to give select permission, we need to give insert. So whatever permission we need to give, we have to mention here. Then to the role, on which table name. Okay. If it is particular column, you mention the table name and put the column names here. Okay, whatever the column names he has to have for the particular table. Okay. Then it's to the username. Yeah. To whatever the rules. So this is I mean, the sample syntax you can just create for your assignment. Then we will go to a topic called function. So this and the fourth homework, I would say it's uh, almost similar. Okay, for this triggers also, you can create a function or a store procedure. You can assign the store procedure or trigger to assign the store procedure or a function to a trigger, or you can just create a trigger and mention what are the activities it has to do. So for example, the functions which is you need to create here is a general function. So basically what it, let me open the code. So this is the table. I mean, this is the same table which we were working on. So this is the order table, and we need to create two functions. The first function is we need to create, we need to get a table information based on the shipping, based on the ship name actually. So I guess this is the ship name, ship to 85B or something. So if we give the string, we need to get the table column as ship name, what is the address, what is the ship city and the ship country. So if the string matches with what we are giving, it should return this kind of data. So this is a function, and the second function is almost similar. Instead of one variable as a one attribute as a parameter, we are giving three parameters. So it has to match the ship name, and the timestamp should be before or the same, and the money should be plus or minus. The freight is the money. So if, for example, if you are trying to get this ship, so once it matches the ship name, it will check for the freight. If the freight is okay, 45 or 50, then it will display the data. So this is the two function which we need to create for the fifth assignment. For creating function, it is the same syntax for what we did for store procedure. So it is basically create or replace function. Okay, and this will be your function name, and this will be the parameters which we will pass, or the input parameter which we will give. Okay, then the same thing, what we will return, we will return the query, or we have to return the table, I guess. Yeah, return the table which we want, and what will be the table columns, column name and types. Okay, multiple columns if you want, we can just add it. Then the usual language and something like PS, I don't know what, PLS, SQL, then begin, and so in between this we need to add our condition. It's basically like, so for example, first condition we will take. So first condition, we are giving parameter 1 as an input. So our SQL should say select the, what are the different items we need. These are the different things we need. So we should select all this thing from orders table where we need to give the condition. So we need to mention, okay, if where the ship name equal to the parameter 1, or there is one more thing, I like or something. So this will, I mean, if you give equal to, unless you mention the same format, it might not show your data. So if you use I like, it will show even if it has a casing difference, if it has upper casing or lower casing. So it's better to use this, or equal to, if you are sure about this. So this is for the first function. The second function, it will not change much. The second function, instead of parameter 1, we will have 3 parameters. Okay, and in this condition we will not have only one, we will have multiple. So that's the only difference. So, and we will mention shipping date, it should not be, maybe should not be maybe should not less than or equal to shipping date. Whatever parameter we are giving, parameter 2 should not be less than or equal to the shipping date, and also the freight money can be freight money is, maybe we can use the between condition to tell whether it's plus or minus 10 or something like that. So this is the entire function schema, you can say, for the fifth assignment. So I don't think it is too difficult. Fifth one. The fourth one is little tricky. Uh, I had some theory before jumping on to the trigger. So as I already told, trigger is nothing but if you have some kind of an action for a particular table to respond after a certain operation. For example, we have a table of a customers or a customer's address or something. Okay, so we have customer address table for Helsinki. Separately, we have separate table for Lappeenranta, for example. But if whoever is working on that particular table is trying to insert a data to a Lappeenranta table of Helsinki's data. Okay, this is a condition. So the SQL should tell us, okay, you are trying to add a different cities data to a different table. It should throw a message like you can't add the data because it's violating the constraint. That is the typical use case of trigger. Okay, whenever there is some kind of handling large amount of data, you never know what we are adding and it's hard to debug. So it's better to have a trigger, and we can add a store procedure or a function to a trigger. So we can just insert, I would say. For example, this is a typical condition of raising a message. Consider an example like uh, there is a there is a function. We can say there is a function for order table. Okay. It is basically calculating your monthly average of what you are purchasing from a supermarket. Okay. Consider this as an example. So if it crosses certain limit, okay, if it crosses certain limit, like it crosses 500 rupees or something, it has to add the user to a different table. That's an action. So instead of we checking that action every time to the table, so we can have a store procedure which will handle this process, and we can have a trigger attached to it. So whenever this happens, trigger will send a message like, okay, this has exceeded and we have added this to the different table. So that can be one of the use cases. So there are different advantages for triggers. So one is that which I mentioned, like it can invoke a store procedure or a function, and we can also have it for a recursion function, which I mentioned. So if it if we have a function which has a direct relationship with other function, this can be used at that point of time. The major problem with triggers is when you are inserting multiple triggers, for example, for a particular table, and if it goes wrong due to some reason, it's very, it's not very difficult, but it's comparatively difficult to debug. So that is one of the major disadvantage of trigger. For trigger, I mean, we need to do two things. First of all, I will tell how we can work on triggers. So, as I told you, either you can invoke a function or a store procedure using a trigger, or you can just use a trigger itself. Okay, there is a two kinds of syntax for that. So, for example, if you don't want to have a function and a trigger will invoke that function, you are creating the entire thing in the trigger itself. So, for that, we have a uh, syntax for this. So this is like, we will say create trigger and the trigger name, whatever it is, and we will tell what operation before or after what operation we need to enable this trigger. Okay, so we need to tell before or after what operation. So what is the operation here, whether it will be insert or delete or an update. So we can have trigger for these three operations, whether it can be for an insert, delete, or an update. And we will tell the table name. Okay. Then we will have this usual begin, and inside that, whatever condition you want to make. For example, we have a limit for a particular table for 50%. We should have it in a table. Okay. If it crosses the 50%, it has to throw a message like your table is full. That's a simple operation. So for that, we don't need a function. We can just tell if the table number of table is sum of table or count of table is more than 50, it has to throw some message to the user that the table is filled, you can't insert. So there's a simple operation, you can just have it inside the begin and end. So this is a trigger function which can be used without invoking a function. For example, you have a bigger operation than that. So in that case, you can still have this create and end and everything on table name, and we have to have execute. Okay, whether it can be a procedure, if it is a short procedure, whether it can be a function. Okay, and we need to give the function or a store procedure name. So this is to just create a trigger for that particular procedure or a function. So, and we already saw the syntax for functions or a stored procedure. So this is how you can create the triggers and triggers for this. Now coming to the homework, we need to create 4 triggers basically. Okay, to give a basic idea. I mean, it will be little confusing at start if you see the homework. So there are 4 tables. Okay, one is animal species, then I guess habitat, specimen, I guess, and then ancestry. So these are the 4 tables and the columns of those tables. Okay, it is nothing but after creating a table, they are just modifying the table and adding the constraint of primary key for that particular table. So instead of adding the first time, they are adding it at the, I mean, after creating the table. So that is the reason why we have alter table statement a lot. And these are the insert queries for 3. Okay. So the first question says, parents are not younger than their offspring. So you can consider these specimens as a different animals. Okay, I mean not different animal, different number of animals. Okay, the main specimen for this assignment is tiger. Okay, these are the different tigers we can consider. Okay, one is and its name is given here, trigger, kit kat, Khan or no or young one. These are the 5 tigers which we have. Okay, the first one says the parents are not younger than their offspring. So it is basically saying if you try to insert a data to the ancestry. Okay, for this query, how you can test it, you have to create a procedure or a function to check whether the given couple of animals, okay, for example 101 and 102, and check whether the sibling is not older than parents or whatever. If it is the other way around, if the parent is younger than offspring, we need to get a trigger message like parent is younger than child or something like that. So that is a requirement for this assignment. So first we need to create a function to match this condition to check for the birth date. So it is basically like you will create a function, and inside that begin and end condition, you need to have a condition like so if you can see the ancestry, first one is the, we can consider it as a sibling, and the second one as a parent. So if you are inserting data to the ancestry like 1001 and 1002, okay, we have to consider the date of birth of these 2 animals. Okay, 5/4/2014 and 17/11/2012. 14 first, if we are inserting 101, which is having date of birth of 2014, and 102, which is having 2012. Now the sibling is 2014 and the parent is 2012. So in this case, the parents are younger than the offspring. So we should get a trigger message like it is violating the consent or whatever. So that is the first question. The second question is we need to consider so it's basically like in habitat, the last one is the temperature 35, and the animal species ideal temperature is 35.5. So this habitat temperature should not be greater than the animal species temperature. So that is a basic requirement. So for testing this, you can create a habitat of having temperature like 50 or something and assign that habitat to this tiger. So in that case, the tiger's ideal temperature is 35, but whatever habitat we have inserted will have a much higher temperature. So in that case, it has to throw an error like it is violating the trigger condition. So that is the second one. And the third one is we need to identify Where is that? Habitat. Yes. So we need to compare habitat size. This is this one to either specimen's weight or height. Okay, it's basically saying we will consider again the same example. Okay, habitats size is 70. Okay, and the specimens, for example, we will consider weight here 30. Okay, and we are adding again on specimen for the same habitat. Okay, 101. 101 is the habitat and the size is 70. We are inserting the first specimen and its weight is 30. It is not greater than 70, so it's fine. So again, we are inserting the second one. Again, it's not greater than the first one. Again, we are inserting the third one. Now, the specimen's weight will be greater than the habitat size. So we need to consider, okay, whether it's overbooked or something. So in this is one of the way you can test, or you can test it using the height or something. And the final one is uh, the same as like first one. We need to try to insert data into the ancestry table by giving different condition. Okay. Currently we have 5 specimen. You can add how many specimen you want by whatever condition you want to test the condition. So ideally what your procedure or a function should do. So ideally it should say, for example, we are having this one as a male, for example, and this one as a female. Maybe we can add this one is again male. Okay. So it has to validate 3 conditions. The last one, the first condition is it should check the, for example, we are inserting data, insert into ancestry table. Okay, these are the 2 column names, EID and parent, and values is we need to give the IDs. Okay, we are going to give the IDs. So when you are giving this input, it has to validate 3 conditions. The first condition is it should check whether it has one male and one female. Okay. The second condition is it should avoid the same gender, whether it's adding MM or FF. Okay. It should tell, ideally it's not a condition, right? It's not a parent condition. So it's basically we are adding both male and both female. It should violate like the parent condition is violated or whatever constraint you can just write in your message. And the third one is when you are trying to insert a male and a null value. Okay, there is a high possibility you might insert this also. That is the reason why they have given a condition. Consider nulls. Okay, when you are testing, I'm saying when you are testing, you have to try to test this, and you have to tell parent information has been added as a null information. So not sure where what is the parent information or whatever, you can just add as a message. So these are the 3 constraints for the final, I mean the third assignment. Fourth one you have to consider. I mean I have given you the, I would say, the structure of what you have to do. I mean apart from that, you have to think only about the condition what you have to insert here. It's basically the SQL statement which you have to think of. I would say, so considering these conditions, you can formulate the SQL query, what it is doing, and then you can add it to your function, or whichever process is easy for you, you can just work on it. So these are the 3 conditions which has to, yep. So any doubts or questions till now? We have a couple of participants. So anything you want me to repeat again, or Okay. Miro, do you have any questions? You can type in the chat, maybe. I don't think I can hear you. Okay. So so it is similar to what you create. For example, when you are creating a table, you will just have that statement, right? You will create a table, and after that you will try to add insert statement. So similar to that, you will create a trigger, and it will be running in the background, for example. So whenever the condition violates, so it will pop up and say the condition has been violated or something. It will not be added in any SQL code or something. Maybe in that case, let me get some example online. Let me share my screen again. So I will try to explain with this example. So for example, they are creating two tables here. Yes. So one is employees table and the other one is employee audit. So these are the different columns which they are having. So they are creating a function. I mean, instead of adding directly the operation to the triggers, I guess they are creating a function called log lost name changes. Okay. I mean, they are just updating the time, I believe. So what is a function will do? It will do nothing but if the new last name, whichever we are giving, if it doesn't matches the old name, this is not equal to condition. So they are trying to insert into the audits table the employee ID and the last name and the change on. So value is the same ID and the last name and the time they are updating recently. Okay, they have updated the name of the person recently. So that is a function which they are doing. So for this function, they are creating a trigger and they are assigning this function to the trigger. So whenever uh, we try to insert, for example, we will go with this example itself. So they are creating a trigger as we did. So they are saying create a trigger before update. So they are doing before we update the data into the table. Execute the procedure, last name. This is a function or a procedure. Okay. So they try to insert two information of the employee, John and Doe or something. Okay. And they are updating the employee of Brown. Okay. And they are again checking the employee audit table. So whenever they update the information, the trigger will say like, okay, the employee information has been updated to the current time. So it will change the time basically in the background. So that is the function it is doing instead of doing in the front end. So basically trigger will be assigned to a particular table, and whenever you have some operation, it will do it in the background. Or if you have some kind of an message or raise exception, it will raise to your SQL window itself directly instead of rising in the background. So that is basically the operation actually.